Listen, this Titans team, they completely and utterly blew a game in which they had no business losing. It's really that simple. Welcome to the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at Broadway Sports Media. We are also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. I am joined, as always, by producer JT. JT, what's going on?
How's it going?
It is Sunday night, and it's going fine for me. However, it's not going well for Titans fans because, well, they lost to the Giants in week one, and it's not great. It's really not great for the team. It was an embarrassing loss, to be sure. There were a handful of embarrassing losses today, as well as a handful of massive, complete and utter choke jobs, which also the Titans fall into that category as well. Let's start with there's so much to get into here at the beginning of the show, and we've got a handful of segments for you today. We're going to talk a good bit about the game, and I'm going to talk about some things I have to say regarding the game. But after that, we're going to get into the news with JT, as always, as well as look back at our best bets, which is maybe the sole bright spot in my day today, but we'll get into that later. We're going to get into a Overreaction Monday segment, which I'm really excited for, because this is every Monday in the NFL schedule is an Overreaction Monday, but this is the Overreaction Monday. Because week one, when you only have one game of sample size, everyone loses their mind, especially because week one is so quirky and is oftentimes a liar, which we'll talk more about later. So we've got a handful of things to talk about today, and I'm excited about that. First, let's talk about this Titans loss, and let's start with the positives that Titans fans can take out of this. There are a handful of positives to take from this game, and I wrote about a number of them at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. So if you want to go check out my winners and losers from the Titans 21-20 loss to the New York Giants article on BroadwaySportsMedia.com, go and check it out. I've got 3 winners and 3 losers from the game that I think you'll find interesting. But the main positive that I keep coming back to is it is in fact true that week one is a liar. In the NFL, this is known to be the case. Week one is always among the strangest weeks of the entire NFL schedule. Teams win that end up being horrible. Teams lose that end up being number 1 seeds. The Titans last year, for example. And so, the Bills last year, for example, the Packers last year, for example, actually, now that I say it, both 1 seeds last year lost in week one, got blown out in week one. So that's something to hold on to if you're a Titans fan. The fact that in week one, things aren't as they seem usually. Now, that being said, this Titans game wasn't it wasn't that big of a mirage, in my opinion. What we saw from the Titans wasn't really that out of character. There was one element of their game that was very out of character, and we'll touch on that in a moment. But generally speaking, the Titans team that we saw today was a lot like the Titans team we were used to seeing at the end of last year. An elite defense with an above average offense that goes in and out of hot and cold streaks within the course of a game that oftentimes mean the game for them. And that's what we saw today. The Titans started the game fantastic. Everything was going perfectly for them. I tweeted out as much. I tweeted out sometime in the second quarter that I was thinking about doing a winners and losers article after the game, but so far the Titans had only provided me half of the article, and it was the winner side of the article. I had written in my notebook that I'm sitting here looking at all of the winning possible categories to talk about in my article and had no losers. And then from that point on, I wrote down 5 or 6 losers in a row because the Titans precipitously fell apart, and things went downhill and never turned around all the way until the clocks hit 000. I guess the Titans clearly heard my cry for balanced content, and oh boy, did they deliver in a big way, because I got plenty of content to cover in my winners and losers article. More losers than winners that I went off on in here, but Well, actually, before we get into more losers, JT, I have to say things could be worse if you're a Titans fan. You could have lost today, and your starting quarterback could need hand surgery, and your starting left tackle could have a high ankle sprain, causing him to miss 4 to 6 weeks. In other words, you could be a Dallas Cowboys fan, which is brutal for them. And I would feel bad for any other fan base if this had happened to them in week 1. But for the Cowboys, I just can't bring myself to feel bad at all. I'm not going to gloat because I don't want anybody to get hurt. Obviously, I don't wish that on anybody. I prefer NFL players to all be good, especially the good ones that are fun to watch, or prefer to be healthy, especially the good ones that we like to watch. But for the Cowboys to already be falling apart, better luck next year. So with the Titans, yeah, let's get into the handful of positive things. The first positive has to be the pass rush, right? The pass rush picked up pretty much right where it left off in 2021. They had 5 total sacks on the evening, as well as 8 QB hits as a team. So the front 4 was disruptive, as we know them to be. Perhaps the most promising individual performance came from second-year outside linebacker Rashad Weaver, who got to work trying to fill the large shoes of Harold Landry as a starter. Weaver was in the backfield pretty much all afternoon, getting 2 sacks of his own, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits. If he can keep up that kind of production for, the majority of the year, if he can end up being 75, 80% of what Landry was, Tennessee's front 4 will be just fine without Harold Landry this year in terms of pass rush. That's assuming, of course, that Bud Dupree takes the reins as the dominant outside linebacker on the team. Against the Giants today, he had a pretty solid outing: 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 quarterback hit. So he had more of an impact on the game than his stats would indicate, just based on the eye test from what I remember from the game. And then, of course, Jeffrey Simmons had, to nobody's surprise, pretty good day, terrorizing Daniel Jones with 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits as well. Another positive is Kyle Phillips and Treylon Burks. The Titans rookie duo at wide receiver looked really good on Sunday afternoon. It was, I think, the most encouraging element of the Titans offense. They were Ryan Tannehill's favorite target in the game. They had 9 and 5 targets respectively. Phillips ended up catching 6 of his targets, and Burks ended up catching 3 of his targets. They had 66 and 55 yards on the day. Kyle Phillips was really kind of Ryan Tannehill's security blanket, especially in that final drive. He hit Phillips multiple times to get down the field and to get into field goal range, which ultimately didn't end up working out for them. But Kyle Phillips was really great all day, outside of obviously a muffed punt that gave the Giants really a fantastic field position that ended up not mattering because Amani Hooker bailed Phillips out with an interception in the end zone. So luckily the Giants didn't capitalize and turn that into points. But that was his sole mistake on the day, which was a bad rookie mistake. He can't be doing that, obviously. But outside of that, he looked really good. And Treylon Burks kind of looked like we expected him to look when he didn't have Malik Willis or another backup quarterback in the game throwing to him in the preseason with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan hits those crossing routes across the middle where we saw him get open a number of times. Ryan also is willing to try those deep shots to him and not underthrow him like Logan Woodside did multiple times in the preseason. So they did not end up connecting on any of those deep shots. But Treylon Burks was the guy that the Titans were clearly trying to get. They were trying to lengthen the field with him. He was their deep threat this evening, in their eyes at least. And although they didn't connect on anything, they tried it a couple of times. They were trying to stretch the field with him, and they see him as a guy whose skill set is complementary to stretching the field in that way. So, that was good to see Kyle Phillips and Treylon Burks play well, and for this Tennessee team to move on without A.J. Brown and diversify their list of viable receiving threats. They need these 2 guys to live up to their billing. And in this first game, at least, they seemed to be headed in the right direction. Another positive from the game, red zone Dontrell Hilliard. I wrote about him in the article as well. He revealed himself as a new favorite in the red zone in terms of targets for the Titans and Ryan Tannehill. He only managed, let's see, in the rushing game, he got 8 yards on 2 carries. But he did end up shining in a receiver role when Tennessee got near the end zone. He brought in 3 catches for 61 yards receiving, and both of the Titans' touchdowns on the evening against the Giants, giving him the second most receiving yards on the team. And those touchdown passes were not him just taking, the hot read screen to the house either. Shout out hot read. He was running down the field and getting open against Giants cornerbacks and safeties in the secondary. He was acting as a proper receiver role and getting open in a way that allowed him to score 2 touchdowns on the night, which is pretty surprising. And I mentioned to JT before the show that, I'm sure there's some sickos out there that are in like 16, 18 team fantasy leagues who probably had to start Dontrell Hilliard in their league because he was the best option that they had, and were probably pleasantly surprised on the evening. So good for y'all, I guess. I'm happy for you, but you're also a sicko for having Dontrell Hilliard in your starting lineup week 1 in the year of our Lord 2022. Anyways, these kind of red zone receiving opportunities for Hilliard is not something that if you've attended any of the Titans training camps, they're not something that you're surprised by. Hilliard was a guy in training camp who the Titans in their numerous red zone drills would target quite a bit. They were getting him open and giving him opportunities in the Titans red zone drills in training camp relatively often, and immediately it translated into the game, which is a really positive thing for this team. That, look, in 2021 their red zone efficiency dipped dramatically, and so for them to try to get back to their red zone efficiencies of 2019, 2020, they're going to need a diversity of viable receiving targets in the red zone, and Hilliard proved himself tonight to be one of those guys. That's pretty much all there is, in my opinion, in terms of positives, besides the fact that Ryan Tannehill had a pretty solid game. In my estimation, he didn't really make any dramatic mistakes. He looked confident. He looked pretty much just like we saw him in training camp. When it came down to the last drive of the game, he managed to march the team down into field goal range. I want to talk about that final timeout that was called by the Titans coaching staff. The Titans had gotten a deep pass, I believe, to Nick Westbrook-Ikhine to get a first down, as well as to finally get into field goal range down deep, within Giants territory on the Giants 35-ish, I believe. And Ikhine got out of bounds, and then the Titans get ready to run their next play. They're lined up, and then the play clock that is getting low, and the Titans coaching staff calls a timeout. Their last timeout of the game, despite the clock already being stopped and there only being less than 20 or 30 seconds left on the clock. It was bizarre to me at the time. It's bizarre to me thinking back. They ended up coming back in after the timeout, and Ryan Tannehill took the snap, ran to the hash that Randy Bullock preferred, took a knee. They lined up real quick and spiked it to stop the game clock with about 3 seconds left on the clock, I believe. And of course, Randy Bullock misses the kick wide left. But why are we calling a timeout here when the clock is already stopped? The play clock is low, but the team is lined up ready to snap the ball. When the press corps asked Coach Vrabel in the post-game press conference why exactly he chose to take the timeout when he did, he just said that they wanted to make sure they knew which hash they wanted to get to for Randy Bullock. But again, at the time, they were still just inside 50 yards, which, is within range for Randy, but you'd prefer to get closer considering you have time and a timeout to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 extra yards to maybe even get it inside of 30 to make the kick way easier. But they burned that timeout, and I just think that was an example of bad coaching and or bad clock management by the team. It was a mistake, and it ended up, not costing them the game, but it certainly did not help them win the game. there were a couple of guys that I spoke to in the press conferences and in the locker room post game. The first of which was head coach Mike Vrabel, and I asked him about the Titans' run defense. Now, before we get to the clip from the question that I asked him, let's talk about this run defense today. If you had to point to one thing on Sunday that was the reason that the Titans lost the game, it was their run defense. It was not only a horrendous effort, but it was also entirely out of character. This Titans group on defense, and I do mean this Titans group, the group that's been together for the past year or two, they have built their entire calling card on terrorizing your quarterback and being a brick wall in the running game. It's been a strength of theirs historically. And so I asked Mike Vrabel why he thinks his squad had such a tough day in the run defense department. And here was his response. The group that's known for their stoutness on defense in the run game, what do you think led to having such a bad day stopping the run?
Good player, poor defense, poor gap integrity. Just a couple times it was edge, sometimes it's inside tackling. We'll have to really reevaluate, what we're doing and give them credit. And that they were able to run the football, which was, the number one key for us on defense.
So on Sunday, the Giants were led by a rejuvenated Saquon Barkley, who I do think is, in fact, back. He looked really good today, and he ran circles around Tennessee. And in the second half, they were getting pretty much whatever they wanted. The Titans are going to have to do some serious soul searching to find themselves in this run defense in particular again, because, listen, they got to do it soon, because in this division with Jonathan Taylor, James Robinson, Travis Etienne, Dameon Pierce, who's a budding star, in my opinion, like having a tissue paper run defense is definitely not an option. Of all of the things you can be bad at defense, bad at on defense in the AFC South, it's run defense. That's not a thing you can do, or you're going to not be able to compete within your division. And so you're not going to win the division and you're not going to go to the playoffs. It's really that simple. So this run defense was plain horrible today, historically bad for the Titans. I couldn't really get a straight answer from anybody as to why. Missing Harold Landry certainly has something to do with it, because he's a really great run defender. But we talked to James Foster on Friday about this very topic. And, we talked about how, losing Landry is a hindrance in both the run defense and in the pass defense, but it's more in the pass defense than it is in the run defense. The Titans have guys who can fill in and plug those holes on the run defense, or at least on paper they do. In today's game, that wasn't the case. They were terrible. Another guy I spoke to in his post-game press conference was Ryan Tannehill. I asked him about the Titans' game plan, because he was speaking about, the Titans not being as consistent as you like them to be throughout the course of the game. On the offensive side of the ball, at least, is what he was speaking about. And he was talking about these cold spells that the offense clearly got in throughout the game. And I asked him, when they were game planning coming into the week, were there certain things that they were planning to do that they just couldn't end up getting done in this game, or was it just a matter of inconsistency? And here's what he had to say. Ryan, was there anything in particular you guys game planned for this week that you weren't able to do in the game, or was it just a matter of inconsistency?
No, I think we had a good game plan coming in. I felt really confident about it, and I feel like we had opportunities with some of the stuff that we were trying to hit. Just inconsistent and didn't take advantage of some of those opportunities when they arose. You don't get in this league, if you don't take advantage of plays whenever you get the opportunity to, then you're going to come up short a lot of the time.
Now, I found it interesting that the Titans' play calling was so sporadic. It almost resembled the play calling that you'd expect in a preseason game to me, because on different drives, the approach seemed to be entirely different. And obviously, they're not going to try the same thing over and over and over again. It's going to change. But there was a moment in the game where this stood out to me most. In the second half, I believe it was in the third quarter, the Titans come out, and it's a Dontrell Hilliard drive through and through. First down, Hilliard run. Henry's on the sideline, no helmet on. Second down, Hilliard run. Henry's still not in the game. Third down, Hilliard's still the back, and Ryan Tannehill tries to pass to him in the flat, and Hilliard drops the ball. 3-and-out punt. Horrible drive, obviously. Why is Henry not in the game? Obviously. Very strange drive. Next drive, the Titans go run heavy. They get Traylon Burks a couple of times down the field. I believe they also hit one of the tight ends, I believe Austin Hooper, as well as Kyle Phillips, to get within, I believe that was the drive that Hilliard scored the eventual touchdown down the left-hand side of the field. And so it was a pass-heavy drive through and through. There were a handful of Henry runs within that drive, but all the progress was made in the passing game. And the Titans, for once, were passing on first and second down. And I was sitting in the press box thinking, why in the world was this not what they were doing the previous drive? Why were they trying what they were trying with Hilliard? It was almost like they were trying things out to see what will and won't work, and going throughout their playbook, willy-nilly, picking different approaches, even though they have nothing to do with one another. It was strange. And I listen, the coaching is not the only reason the Titans lost this game, but their offensive coaching is still incredibly suspect, and it has to improve, or else this team's not going to get anywhere. They do not have the personnel required to overcome bad offensive coaching. That is eminently clear. Also spoke to Derrick Henry in his post-game press conference. Speaking of Derrick Henry, I asked him about, as he's become a budding leader on this team, what he and the other leaders on this Titans offense, what they talk about and how they kind of game plan a week like this, where they're coming off of an embarrassing loss. They've got a serious matchup against the Bills on Monday Night Football that they are staring directly down the barrel of. How do you prepare some of the guys in this locker room to, get up and improve on a short notice to be able to compete in a game like this? Here's what he had to say. What's the approach in the locker room from leaders on the team when you're coming off of a loss like this and you're looking down the barrel of a big game like you guys have coming up this week? What do you guys say to some of the guys on this team to get them to the place they need to be able to compete at a higher level?
Yeah, as leaders, you just want to make sure everybody rallies together, stay with it. We let one slip away. Stuff happens. You know what I'm saying? You can't get down on yourself. We got to come back in this week and be positive, make the corrections, hold each other accountable, and then get ready to go.
Now, we've talked a number of times, much is made ado about the fact that the Titans love to lose games in which they are supposed to win, like this game, and how they love to win games in which they're supposed to lose, like the Bills game, perhaps. And it's a little bit more than that. It's just the fact that the Titans, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and get into it. Another loser in my article is front running. And I think the Titans, this is not news, but I felt compelled to mention that the Titans are an awful team as a front runner. It's seemingly their least favorite activity, I guess, based on the way that they act. And it's certainly among the things that they're worst at. They just love coming from behind in games and winning by the skin of their teeth. They love, playing tight games against opponents that they are clearly better than, like the Giants. If they're going to blow you out, you have to be a team that's supposed to be better than them. Unless you're the Jaguars, they'll blow out the Jaguars. But everybody else that's bad, they refuse to blow out. And in games like this one against the Giants on Sunday afternoon, you can see them clearly falling asleep at the wheel. When they get off to a good start like they did in this game and get out to a relatively comfortable lead, they try to coast. And some teams can do this relatively well, but oftentimes it ends up being a mistake. And teams talk about trying not to rest on the laurels of a lead. And the Titans are particularly bad at it. When this team tries to coast, at least on offense, they always end up falling flat. Listen, in order to be a great team, you have to be able to handle yourself in these kinds of situations. And the Titans plainly have not figured that out yet. Until they do, they're going to continue to lose to these inferior opponents. That's just factual. Now, it may mean that they manage to win against opponents like the Bills next week, and I think it's interesting that the Bills they came out as a 9.5-point favorite in Vegas. This is exactly the kind of game that the Titans love to win for some reason. Do I think they're going to win? Absolutely not. No, I don't. But I also thought the same thing about last year when the Titans played the Bills, and the year before that when the Titans played the Bills. And guess what? They handled the Bills decisively in both games. So is it possible that they win given this team? Absolutely. Do I think that they're going to give the Bills a run for their money? Absolutely. Do I think that Vegas at 9.5-point favorites is taking this, this local knowledge into consideration? Absolutely not. And that's why at 9.5, I will be betting the Titans, but we'll talk more about that in the best bet segment on Friday, I guess. The last segment, or the last soundbite that I got from Titans players tonight was from Kevin Byard. I spoke to him in the locker room, asked him about what his keys to the game coming up against the Bills on Monday night would be. Just how you approach, again, as a leader of this team, how do you approach figuring out what this team can do within 1 week of preparation to get better in a hurry? And what are the things they have to do differently than they did today in order to compete against a much better team? And here was his answer.
Hey, Kevin, like you said, focus shifts to Monday now. Big game against a really good team. What are some of the things that you guys are going to be focusing on, you think, most this week to be prepared to play a better game against a better team?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to be eliminate the big plays. Can't play great defense if you're giving up big plays. I don't care who you're playing against, what team, what's the record. You can't give up big plays and win ball games. I would just think that we got to start there. You know what I'm saying? We got to start with the stuff that immediately is going to get us beat, and we got to eliminate the big plays.
So while Kevin Byard mentioned big plays as his main key to being able to contend against a much better team, and I agree with him, the big plays that the defense let up in the second half in particular, Christian Fulton, for some reason, peaking on the Sterling Shepard route that ended up being a long touchdown and then whiffing on the tackle. A number of different Saquon Barkley runs that were not house calls, but were massive 20, 30, 40, 50-yard chunks. Those are the things that the Titans can't allow against a Bills team that once they get the momentum going, they will not stop. We know this about the Bills. Their offensive firepower is just so much higher than the Titans have to offer. So that's a big part of it. Another part of it, and this is the last bit I want to talk about before we get into the news with JT, the offensive penalties this team inflicted on themselves in the second half of this game. They spent most of the second half on offense going forward just to have to bring it on back because they had 7 penalties for 50 yards on the day. And the vast majority of that came courtesy of the offense in the back half of the game. There were multiple holding calls on the offensive line. Brewer and Lewan. Mostly I forgot. Lewan had a different penalty. Brewer was the main culprit in that regard. They also had a delay of game. These penalties in the second half, they forced the Titans into first and extra long 3 different times on the same drive. They were first and 20, first and 15, first and 20, all within one drive where they ended up getting into the end zone. But that's something that you can get away with against a team like the Giants. That's the luxury of playing a team like the Giants. You can shoot yourself repeatedly in your own feet, and you can kind of get away with the lack of discipline. But against much more talented teams, like, I don't know, the majority of the AFC, you can't afford to be so undisciplined. And if the Titans want to be a contender in their own conference, they have to run a much tighter ship. Another one, just to bring the point home here, on the final drive of the game, when the Titans were trying to march down the field and to get a field goal to, they had already snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in this game. They were now trying to snatch victory back by getting a last-second field goal. First play of the drive, veteran left tackle, Taylor Lewan, jumping off sides on the first play. And it backed the team up 5 yards, which they ultimately got down into field goal range. But do you think kicker Randy Bullock would have maybe appreciated those 5 yards shaved off of the distance that he ultimately had to attempt the game winner from? You think a 42-yard field goal kick's a little bit easier than a 47-yard field goal kick? I do. Listen, this Titans team, they completely and utterly blew a game in which they had no business losing. It's really that simple. Bud Dupree earlier this week in his press conferences before the game, he talked about how this Giants team, guys like Saquon Barkley and guys like Daniel Jones, they had something to prove. That we knew that they had something to prove. And that the Titans were focusing on how they didn't want to be the ones that those guys proved it on. Well, at least one of those guys proved it on you today. Plain and simple. Saquon Barkley, 160 yards. Best game he's had in years against any team. First time the Giants have been 1-0 in years, courtesy of your friendly neighborhood Tennessee Titans. You got to wear this one. And I mean, ultimately, I don't think any of us should really be that surprised, because if I had told you before the Titans' schedule even came out back in March, hey, in 2022, the Titans are going to find the easiest game on their schedule. They're going to find a way to lose. What would you have said? If you're a Titans fan or you know anything about the Titans, you'd have said, yeah, probably. That sounds about right. Yeah. And guess what? The Giants were clearly the easiest game on this Titans schedule, and they found a way to lose. So although many people are surprised by this outcome, I'm not sure that you should be. And, we found out at least this half of the Titans MO from the past couple of years, they're still that Titans. This week, we'll find out if they're the other half of the Titans MO, competing against teams that on paper they have no business competing against. In the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. Maybe they're still the old Titans, and in that case, they'll be the weirdest 1-1 in the NFL. If they're not, this Titans team is going to be coming back home to host the Raiders in a must-win game, having started 0-2. Let's get to JT with the news.
Alrighty, getting into the news here. Don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it's just an interesting stat to bring up. The Titans defense today. They allowed 238 total rushing yards against the Giants today. It's the most the Titans defense has allowed since week 12 of 2018. Just for a little reference, in 2021, the Titans only allowed 100 plus total rushing yards just 3 times. Yep. One thing I think that they need to look into this week, definitely with a team like the Bills coming up, is consistency. Because you could see in that game, it was night and day with the Titans. I mean, the first half, they were very good against the run, and then they kind of just let Saquon explode. Now, the Bills, I mean, they have Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, James Cook, not guys who can even hold a candle to Saquon Barkley.
No. But
consistency across the board is going to be a big thing going into the week.
Yep, agreed entirely. It was a horrible day with run defense. Like you said, a historically bad day, dating all the way back a couple of years. They have to get back to what they were like last year, or they are going to have a very long season in the AFC South.
Also getting into week 1, still talking about the AFC South. It was kind of a blow-up day
here. Yeah, today. Not a great day for poverty division of the AFC South.
For the entire AFC South, with the Titans and the Jaguars taking L's against the bottom of the barrel of the NFC East. Also not a great division. Of course, the Titans losing today against the Giants, and the Jaguars losing to Commander Carson on the newly Washington Commanders.
Love that.
And the Houston Texans and Indianapolis Colts neither taking a win nor a loss, tying each other 20-20, which I believe...
There's not a team in this division that has won a game thus far, and 2 of them played each other. 2 of them played each other, and still nobody has won. You would think, we got to get one of these guys a win. Let's have them play each other. But no. Poverty division, through week 1, 0 wins, 2 losses, 2 ties. Disgusting.
Well, the division leader right now is 0-1. So that is just something to look forward to into week 2. Also talking about the rest of this wild week 1. We had a couple interesting games. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that are pretty interesting, starting with the Bears.
The Bears
taking a home game against the 49ers and Trey Lance, 19-10, in what was just absolutely...
they played in a kiddie pool the entire game?
They really did.
They played in a kiddie pool. Yeah, this game, I was so happy to see this One, because the Bears need something to go right for them this year, and I'm afraid after this week, not much will. But the 49ers, I've not understood the hype on them all year. The idea that they're going to be a contender in the NFC, the idea that they're going to be, listen, like their team top to bottom is really great. Obviously, they don't have a ton of holes in their roster. However, at the quarterback position, there's a significant hole in my mind as of now. Is Trey Lance going to eventually get good? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there's a good, decent chance. But is he anywhere near being good at, like, people are thinking, oh yeah, second year jump, Trey Lance, here we come, second year QB. You know how that goes. He doesn't qualify, man. He played half as many games in college as most quarterbacks coming into the NFL. And then last year he played 2 games with the 49ers. So I think it'll be by mid-season or maybe 3/4 of the way into the season before he ends up maybe figuring some things out and looking pretty good. But by then, I'm not sure it's going to be enough time left for them to, get in position to make a deep run. So I was happy for the Bears and happy that the 49ers got put in their place a little bit.
Speaking of the 49ers with their head coach, Kyle Shanahan, we're going to move over to the Falcons-Saints game where the curse of Kyle Shanahan and his choke job still are around as the Falcons once again falconed away another win, losing to the Saints 27-26.
I really thought they had this one too.
Yeah, I was checking my Twitter feed and, no surprises here when I saw another graphic of the Falcons having a win probability of 99.7% or something like that going into the last 3 minutes or something.
So sad. But I guess good for the Saints. Horrible for the Falcons, but they're used to it at this point. It's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Marcus Mariota didn't look bad though.
Well, until he fumbled the snap at the end of the game, that gave
true.
Anyways. But yeah, he looked fine, and they looked okay. I'm not sure how much of that game was a week 1 mirage and how much of it was just, maybe the Falcons' offense is a little bit better than people think. But we'll have to see. I'm curious. I really genuinely am curious to see that game down the stretch, even though I think that they are probably going to be vying for the one seed, or not one seed, the number 1 overall pick come this spring.
Moving over to the AFC North here, the Steelers won on a last-minute field goal.
JT, this game was infuriating. God, this game was a disaster. Sorry, tell me about it.
I was just gonna say it would have been really interesting to have 2 ties happen. I was kind of rooting for it, to be honest.
I was rooting for it too, man.
I was rooting for 2 ties on week 1. I think that you would have saw from like ESPN or Adam Schefter had been like, this is the first time it's happened ever, and it was going to be one of those weird stats, that I just love seeing. But, coming into the season, the whole talk was the Bengals are going to have just a revamped line. It's going to be 10 times better. Was totally not the case today. Joe Burrow was getting pressured left, right, center, and behind. His stat line today, he went 33 for 53.
That's pretty good.
For 338 yards.
That's pretty good.
3 touchdowns.
That's good.
And then 4 interceptions.
That's really bad.
Yeah.
That's awful. It was hot potato out there for Joe Burrow, man. The number I just have to point out the Steelers lost the turnover battle. 5-0. Is that what you were about to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me about that. The fact that they still almost lost the game despite winning the turnover battle 5-0.
I was going to say, it looked very much like that game last season between the Bengals and the Packers, where each team had a perfect chance to win that game in overtime, and both, I don't know what it is about Paul Brown Stadium, well, I guess now Paycor Stadium. With just missed field goals in overtime. But apparently there's something about it with Evan McPherson, and whoever else is coming into town for that. But a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover here for both teams, I would say.
I mean, it very well could be. I didn't know who to root for by the end of that game. I was rooting for the Steelers, obviously, because I had bet on them and won a decent amount of money on them for having won. But if you're going to be winning a turnover battle 5-0 and still let this other team take you to overtime and then almost beat you in overtime, and you deserve to lose, man. But also, the Bengals deserve to lose because they turned the ball over 5 times. Oh, it was so frustrating. Both teams sucked. They both deserved a loss. You couldn't give them both a loss. So I guess the team that turns it over 5 times is worse than the team that gets it 5 extra times and still almost doesn't win. Whatever.
That is very fair.
Yeah, the Bengals, they need to not be doing that. Joe Burrow can't be doing that, or they're not going to be a very good team.
Moving over to the NFC North, we have the Vikings, who absolutely pounded the Packers in today, 23-7. It's very clear that there's one thing that I can tell you with the Packers, and that is Aaron Rodgers misses Devontae Adams.
I mean, how could you not? He's arguably the best wide receiver in the league. No? What do you have his stat line from today with the Raiders?
Devontae Adams with the Raiders, who also lost to the Chargers today. Adams was clearly Derek Carr's safety blanket, getting 10 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown in that loss.
Yeah, that's a crazy stat line. The Packers would have debut there.
Very much like that today from what I saw.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch this game, but you did, right? And so it sounds like the passing game kind of non-existent. Yeah.
I mean, the whole offensive game was not very existent for them. I think they got it going a little bit down the stretch there. They had that tandem of Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon towards the end there. That's how they got their score. But I mean, it's kind of what you expected from a wide receiving core of Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, the new guys in Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. I mean, it was a lot of drop balls, a lot of confusion, just some first time getting out there against some real defenses. It was very frustrating, and you could see how frustrated Aaron Rodgers was.
Real quick on the other side of the ball, can you remind me, JT, what was that I mentioned on this here very podcast on Friday last week, on the Friday episode? I mentioned somebody as my dark horse MVP candidate for the season.
I will say Kirk Cousins is giving Josh Allen a run for his money right now through 1 week for MVP.
He looked pretty good today, didn't he?
He did.
Pretty good. And I got ruthlessly ridiculed in some of the private messages that JT and I are part of with some other buddies of ours for this take. And I need it to publicly be known that if I'm right about this and he's in the MVP race down the stretch, even just in the race, the hell that I'm going to rain down on you fools for ever having doubted me and my wisdom. You will need God's mercy placed upon you to survive it, okay? I just had to throw that out there. But no, the Vikings looked good. I'm happy to have picked them. Speaking of picks, well, you have one more segment or one more thing to mention in the news, and then we can recap the best bets, yeah?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about some key injuries from around the league that were kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Some of them came back already with kind of the results and how much time they're going to be missing. For instance, TJ Watt left today's game against the Bengals. He was tearing up Joe Burrow, but had to leave that game. Found out it is a torn pectoral muscle, and he's going to be out 3 to 4 months, which definitely is a blow to that Steeler defense for sure.
It's the same injury that JJ Watt, his brother, had 2 years ago, I believe, that took him out most of the season. So that's brutal for them. He's going to be gone for months.
Also, quarterback Mac Jones is dealing with some back issues during that game against the Dolphins today.
Now, that one's strange. Did he leave the game? I didn't get to watch this game because of the Titans game, obviously.
I believe he left for a little bit, but he was able to play through it. Just something kind of to watch here down the stretch here.
Sure.
Keenan Allen left the game today against the Raiders with a hamstring injury. He did not return to that game. It's going to be interesting to see if he will be able to play this week, assuming because they are on a short week this week.
Oh, that's right. They play
against the Chiefs.
Yep.
Elijah Mitchell.
Huge game for them, by the way.
Yeah, very big game.
They need him.
Elijah Mitchell also for the 49ers. His injury timetable is kind of up in the air right now. Not a lot of information on him, but he did have to leave today's game against the Bears and did not return. T. Higgins, wide receiver for the Bengals, suffered a concussion, something to watch. And then, of course, the news we got actually right before recording this podcast. Yep. Dak Prescott will have to get surgery on his hand. I don't know exactly what the injury was.
It's
his throwing hand, yes. Yeah. And he's going to be out a couple weeks.
Brutal for the Cowboys. Kind of some brutal injuries across the board here. We had some kind of freak injuries today. Don't love to see that, obviously. Before we get done with the news here, JT, let's recap our best bets here. let's talk about what kind of week we had. I wasn't keeping up with it, but you, as the diligent producer that you are, I'm sure that you kept track of today's bets. So what were our final records for today?
So I do have to keep track of them, and I will say that you did in fact go 4-1 today. I think the only one that you dropped was the Titans game.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this town who lost a little money on the Titans today, but 4-1, I will take it. A great start. Who was I riding with here? The
you were riding with the Vikings, the Texans, I believe.
Yep. The
Steelers
Lions and the Steelers.
And the Lions.
Love it, especially the Lions coming back and covering there at the very end. Big fan of that. Who are you riding with this week? What went so wrong?
A lot of things actually. Turns out Baker Mayfield just does not have that dog in him.
He did, though. He did until they kicked a 59-yard field goal. Brutal way to lose that game for Carolina. You had them in a pick 'em,
but I did have them
in
the
pick 'em there
'em
until the very end.
I also had. Who else did I have?
You had the Jaguars, right?
I did have the Jaguars, and Commander Carson
He
did not do me any favors right there. The one I did have this week that was one of the ones that I won was Bucks minus 2.5 against the Cowboys. So I'll gladly take that one to the bank. And then the other one that turned out to be a closer game than it really was.
Yeah.
I took the Raiders plus 3.5. So right now I'm 1-4. I still got the Broncos country. Let's ride me to a 2-3 week. But I think we were talking before the show here.
We were.
I
went to the log. I went to the
logs.
I kept like we said on Friday. We did this last year, just the two of us with some friends. And I went to the log that I was keeping on our weekly record in our best bets. And it is in fact the case that last year I started 4-1 through week 1, and JT started 2-3, identical to his record from this week.
Assuming the Broncos win.
Correct. Assuming the Broncos. I need them to lose just so I can throw off the bad juju here, because last year I got out to the hot start and then I went. Let me pull it up here. Over the next couple of weeks, I went 2-3, 1-4, 2-3, 1-4, 1-4, 2-3, 2-3, 1-4. Very bad. Very, very bad. Well below 500. I picked it up a little bit in the back half of the season, got close to 500 by the end of the year, but not quite. JT over that same stretch, after going 2-3, went 3-2, 4-1, 3-2, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1. In the hottest streak that I've, with my own eyes, seen anybody get on. So I guess if you're a historical bettor, then perhaps riding with me this week was the right call. And maybe you need to ride the JT wagon for the next 7 weeks.
We'll see. As I was saying, week 1 is just kind of that baseline. I'm ready to do my homework this week, and I'm ready to get back on the winning side. All
right. Well, I take a 2-game lead here. Lord knows I need it. We'll see how things go going forward. That's JT with the news. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a segment that we're definitely doing this Monday. I'd love to do it in some future Mondays, but this is the ultimate. This is the Super Bowl of all Mondays for this segment, and it's the Overreaction Monday segment. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, every Monday in the NFL news cycle is in fact an Overreaction Monday, because we love to overreact when we have 6 more days until substantial NFL football again. But in week 1, when there is just a 1-game sample size for everybody, we love to just assume that everything we saw in week 1 is the gospel truth. And we're going to freak out about the 49ers are bad and the Bears are good. The Titans are bad and the Giants are good. We've talked about this. Week 1's a liar. We know that week 1's a liar, but it's not all lies. Sometimes week 1 is a reflection of how good a team actually is. So we're going to go through a couple of Titans-specific topics and then a couple of league-wide topics that JT has cooked up for me here to react to. And I'm going to deem them overreaction or not an overreaction. Okay? Easy as that. We're going to go through a couple of these, and I'm excited to get through them. And, if you are listening to this and you disagree with me, tweet at us. Tweet at the show at Hot Read Pod on Twitter. Tweet at JT_Runke. Tweet at Easton Freeze. Tweet at Broadway Sports or Broadway TN. Tweet at us about how you disagree and what you think the correct take is. But I'm going to in fact give you all the correct answers here, so you can tell me why what you think is wrong. Anyways, JT, give me the first Titans specific take for our Overreaction Monday.
Yeah, let's get into one that we've talked about a lot on this podcast today. We're going to start off with the Titans run defense here. Going forward with this 1 week sample size, are they a bottom 15 run defense in the league?
No, they are not. That's an overreaction, and here's why. The Titans run defense, like I said, has been among the best in the NFL in the past couple of years. It's been one of their strong suits in the past couple of years. Like we mentioned earlier in the show, the Titans only allowed 3 games last year in which they allowed an opponent to rush for over 100 yards. Every other game, they kept the opponent's rushing total under 100 yards. And that's against some pretty good rushing teams in there. The Colts twice, and the Ravens in the year previous, they held them to a pretty decent run total. The Jaguars are a decent running team. The Texans, all these teams that are known for their rushing, the Titans have managed to keep them well below the Patriots last year, keep them well below 100 yards. And so this team's going to find themselves, I think, bottom 15 is certainly an overreaction. Without Harold Landry, is there a chance that the run defense isn't as good? Yes. But I don't think that it's going to be as bad as it was this week at any other point this year. I think this is the low point, and it's up from here. Now, how far up? That's the question.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was just kind of getting some of those jitters out, and they know they got to lock it in for the rest of the season. Moving on to the AFC South here.
Juggernaut.
Is this division a 3-horse race?
It is. It is a 3-horse race. That's not an overreaction. And that's not a reaction based on this first week. That's a reaction just based on, I think, logic. Now, hang on. I'm realizing as I'm saying this, what 3 horses are you referencing in this take?
I am referencing, of course, the Titans.
Right.
And the Colts.
Uh-huh.
And I'm putting the Texans in here.
Okay. Hang on. Now, that is an overreaction. That's an Overreaction Monday overreaction right there. Cooked up perfectly, freshly for Overreaction Monday. The Texans, listen, the Colts lost, or almost lost, ended up tying with, LOL, they have to wear that one all year long like a scarlet A across their chest. I hate ties so much.
Good callback there.
Yeah.
Reference?
Very
Good reference.
Good literary. I'm very well read. Very well read. The Colts managed to tie in that game because the Colts are really, really bad in week 1. Now, part of this is the fact that they decide to try out a new quarterback in week 1 every year for the past, I don't know, forever, it seems like. And so that's like not a very good recipe for success. And, as long as they continue to do that, I think they're going to continue to underachieve in week 1 because it does, in fact, take time for you to get into a rhythm with a new team and with a new quarterback, the most important position on the field. The Texans, they're a feistier team than a lot of people realize. I think that they've got, competent coaching in Lovie Smith. They've got a better quarterback than most people give Davis Mills credit for. They've got some talent on both sides of the ball. Damian Pierce is a guy I mentioned who I'm high on. Brandon Cooks continues to be the sneakiest 1,000 yard per year receiver in the league. They've got talent. Are they good? Definitely not. No, they are not within the race for this division. I think the Jaguars will eventually be in the race for the division, and I think Commander Carson is just a wagon, but that's a topic for another bit of this segment. I hope we get to I hope Commander Carson's in your list, but yeah, I don't think it's a 3-horse race with your 3 horses. That's an overreaction.
Alrighty, moving on to kind of one of the bright spots today for the Titans, Kyle Phillips. Is he a young budding star in the making here in this wide receiver core? Right. Or is he going to kind of drop off a bit, and are those mistakes going to catch up to him like he had today?
No, that's an overreaction that he's mistake prone. I think that he made a rookie mistake today that ended up almost costing the Titans, but it didn't. It ultimately did not. And he is a young star. I've been saying this for weeks through training camp. It was evident that he is a young star in the making for this team. Was a steal in the 5th round, wide receiver out of UCLA. He's going to be a perennial target in the slot, in the red zone. He's going to be a security blanket for the Titans quarterback for years to come, at least as long as he's on contract here in Nashville. He's a budding star.
Moving on to one that viewers might gasp at, might take a back here, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
Is Derrick Henry washed?
Derrick Henry washed watch? Wow. That's an overreaction. It's definitely an overreaction. When did we start expecting Derrick Henry to be good in week 1? I thought that we knew, like collectively as a society, as NFL watchers and enjoyers, that Derrick Henry's personal preseason does in fact include week 1 of the regular season and maybe, a couple of weeks into the regular season. Last year, he got off to a very slow start in that debacle against Arizona at home. Only had, I believe, less than 60 yards on the game, and then had a really big game in week 2 at Seattle. But the year before that, it took him a while to get up to speed. That first game against the Broncos, he was nothing special. Every single year we do this. Oh my gosh, Derrick Henry. He looks a little slow in the first game. Oh, Derrick Henry, he didn't score on the touchdowns. Oh, Derrick Henry didn't break away and get a big run. Derrick Henry, he's yards per carry, this and that. Is Derrick Henry maybe slowing down? Yeah, maybe. But since when has week 1 been the measuring stick for that? If we're measuring Derrick Henry based on past success, we'd say, oh, look at that. Derrick Henry is right on schedule. So it's an overreaction. Derrick Henry is not confirmed washed yet through 1 week.
And one more here based on today's game against the Titans and the Giants.
Okay.
Are the Giants good? Is this Danny Dime season?
No, the Giants are not good. The Giants are a bad football team. The Titans were clearly the better team the entire game. Anybody that watched knew that, and they knew that. Oh, look at that! They didn't watch this game and think, oh, look at that. Giants are better than people give them credit for. Man, they picked it up. They got it to get no. You watch that game and you go, oh, look at that. The Titans blew it in monumental fashion. That's what happened. They let a team worse than them beat them at home in the home opener. Unforgivable mistake, can cost them greatly going forward. But is this Giants team good yet? No. Now, is Brian Dable a really good, I think, coaching hire? Yeah. And do they have some talent on that team? Yeah. Saquon Barkley's still good. Darius Toney, if you can rein him in like as an individual, good. Some really great, talented guys on the defense. 2 guys that weren't in there today, and Azeez Ojulari and their other Kayvon Thibodeau. Thank you, Kayvon Thibodeau. Both of those guys, they're top 2 pass rushers. Those guys weren't in there today, but those guys really good and talented. They've got some talented guys. They're a safety duo, limited in some aspects, but relatively talented. This team has some talent, and they've got a good coach, and I think in the next couple of years they're going to be a lot better. And thank goodness for the Giants organization, who's been wallowing in despair for a long time. But no, in 2022 they are not a good team. Overreaction.
All right, so far a lot of overreactions, which is par for the course.
Oh, look at that, because it's Overreaction Monday. That's very fitting.
Moving on to a league-wide kind of couple takes here.
I'm excited about these.
We had the Rams get absolutely blown out by the Bills.
Disgusting game. Worst game of the week, actually. Worst game of the week. Can confirm.
We had the 49ers go into Soldier Field and get beat.
Into Soldier Kiddie Pool, and they lost. Yeah.
And we had the Chiefs march into Arizona's home field and just
dummies
body them today.
Yep.
Now we'll see what Seattle can do tomorrow.
Not hold my breath.
But is the NFC West bad?
NFC West bad confirmed. Oh, I want so badly to say not an overreaction, because it'd be hilarious. Was it not just last year that all the talk was, holy cow, the NFC West is a wagon. Everybody, it's an arms race out west. The NFC West, best division in football history, ? Which I'll remind you we're now doing with the AFC West 1 year later. I'm sure that will last and definitely not, be something that we laugh at going forward. Looking back, I'm sure there will be a reason we'll be like, why did we say that? We're saying that now with the NFC West, at least through week 1. And while I think They have some teams that are a little bit overhyped. I think the Rams are a little overhyped coming into this year. I definitely think the Niners are overhyped this year. Cardinals aren't overhyped. They're just the Cardinals. And I don't know what to tell you. Cliff is an interesting coach, and Kyler needs to do more homework. And then the Seahawks, God bless them, are looking for a new QB in the top 5 picks of the draft next year, whether they know it or not. They're not bad, but are they good?
We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Maybe. They have some not good teams for sure. They're not all good like we expected them to be last year. The Cardinals, I think, are going to end up being very mediocre to bad. I know that Seattle is going to end up being bad. The Rams, I don't think are bad, but that offensive line so far has been bad. And if it doesn't get a lot better, they will be bad. Or if Stafford's arm is just cooked, if either of those things happens, they'll be bad. And the Niners, if Trey Lance sucks, I don't care how good the rest of your team is, they'll be bad. So they all have bad potential, but it's too early to say that they're bad through week 1. Let's bring it back on next month's Overreaction Monday. But as of now, it's an overreaction.
Moving kind of league-wide here, who can really compete with the Bills and the Chiefs? Is that an overreaction to say that there's nobody else who can compete with them right now?
Yes. Yes, it is, and here's why. It's not because I don't think that those two teams are the favorites in the AFC to meet in the championship game and come out of the AFC. I think that they are pretty clearly. However, if just based on week 1 performances, we were going to be deeming teams, the wagon that year that is just, nobody can compete with them. Then last year, it's the Saints who murdered the Packers. It's the Cardinals who murdered the Titans. It's maybe it's the Steelers who beat up on the Bills at home. Maybe it's are the Texans decent? They killed the Jaguars in week 1 last year. Can anybody compete with them? So no, these things aren't true in week 1. Again, week 1's a liar. These things may be true, but probably aren't. We need to see. Ask me in a month or 2 with the Bills and Chiefs. They're up there, but to say that nobody else is up there to compete with them in the entire conference or in the entire league, that's an overreaction.
Moving over, speaking of our Super Bowl contenders, we kind of talked about the Rams already. Definitely have a suspect line, kind of feeling that hangover. We also have the Bengals feeling a hangover as well with their offensive line and kind of doing that, but we're not going to get into that. Okay. Both of them have a hangover so far. We'll see if that continues. However, are the Steelers a playoff team? Is that an overreaction to say right now?
Well, because the Steelers beat the Bengals, they have to be a playoff team, right?
Yeah.
Right, that's just the math. Like the Bills beat the Rams, they're a playoff team. Steelers beat the Bengals. Bengals were also in the Super Bowl. So, okay, gotcha. So, Steelers are a playoff team. No, the Steelers are not a playoff team. That's an overreaction. They, again, were bad today. They managed to win despite murdering the Bengals in turnover differential. They barely squeaked that game out. They are not good. They are not a playoff team. Now, this is Mike Tomlin we're talking about. And Mike Tomlin famously does not have losing seasons. He's incapable of it. He really is. And it's fantastic. I think it's an incredible skill. So could they be the 8th team in the conference? Could they be the 9th team in the conference? Yeah, definitely. I think that they probably will be. I think they'll be, 8-9, 9-8, and they'll be right there on the outside looking in. That's what I think this team will be. So overreaction, the Steelers are not a playoff team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, because something that I forgot to mention in our news segment about injuries, and for kind of good reason, because it seems that the Steelers want to keep sweeping it under the rug. Najee Harris did not play most of the fourth quarter and overtime because of his foot injury. And they want to say after the game, oh, it's fine. It's fine.
If it was fine, where was
he? Would be playing,
Yeah. Where was he?
And if your offense is going to ride or die with the volume king Najee Harris, he has to play. So I agree with you. I don't think they're going to end up with a playoff spot.
All right,
moving to someone who might have a playoff spot in the AFC, are the Dolphins a playoff contender?
I think they definitely are a playoff contender. I think that's not an overreaction. Now, did they play a team today that may be really bad? yeah, the Patriots might be really bad on offense, or at least until Bill Belichick decides, oh, well, maybe I don't want to have these two defensive coaches run my offense. Maybe I'll just do it myself. And then they'll be, like capable, I guess. But until then, as long as it's Dumb and Dumber running the defense or running the offense over there, it's going to be a bad team. And, the Dolphins, they looked fast today. We knew they were fast. They looked competent today. We knew that their coaching was competent, at least. Tua didn't look like a disaster today. That's good. He's surrounded with a ton of weapons. He shouldn't. He should look pretty good. So I think this team is a contender. Are they a contender in their division? No, they're not. I don't think they're a contender with the Bills. It'll be fascinating to see them play, but I don't think that they are at that level. Are they a contender for one of the wild card spots in the AFC? Yeah, I think that they are. So not an overreaction.
I agree with you on that one. Moving on to kind of some fantasy overreaction.
Okay.
Of course, we had potential in most of your guys' fantasy drafts, first or second overall pick, Christian McCaffrey, finally get back on the field today.
That's right.
And only record 15 fantasy points today, which is not usually what Christian McCaffrey does. So I'm going to offer this question to you. Is it an overreaction to say that Christian McCaffrey is officially mid?
Yes, he is mid. Yeah, it's an overreaction to say that, but I want so badly for it to not be an overreaction. I tweeted this weeks ago, I think, at least a couple weeks now. We all in the fantasy world talked about Christian McCaffrey coming in like, oh man, if he's hurt, he's hurt, and that's a bummer, and he's got the injury bug at this point in his career. But if he's healthy, man, you got one of you got the best fantasy player of all time playing for you. Like he just has to stay healthy. That's literally it. You just got to stay healthy and you will be goated. Your fantasy team will be so good. And so I tweeted out like, hey guys, what if there's an option C in which Christian McCaffrey is back and healthy and like perfectly fine. Except he's super mid, like he's super mediocre. I think that would be the funniest possible outcome, personally, if he's back and he's just not good at football anymore for some reason. And so I want this to be the case. Today, he only had... Pause. That's low. Where's the fucking record?
Hold on, I got it here.
You have it up?
Yeah, I can get it up. It's good. CMC went. You just want to write it down real quick?
Okay, no, I got it now.
Okay.
Today he had 10 rushing attempts for 33 yards, a 3.3 yard average, and a touchdown. And he had 4 receptions for 24 yards. That's not a great stat line, JT. I think he might be mid, but based on this one performance, no, you can't say that he is. It's an overreaction so far. But another one that I want to revisit when we get back to doing this, maybe when we get back to doing this segment in the future. Are there any more that we have to cover?
Yeah, we got one more. We're going to end the show with this one. And It's mostly because we've been name dropping him like crazy the entire show so far.
Is this guy's name alliterative?
It could be. It could be. Maybe.
Okay.
Today, we saw something that we haven't seen in a while. Oh. And it could be the second coming of Commander Carson.
Carson.
Now with a team that he can finally call home. So I'm going to offer to you, is Commander Carson back? And is he good?
So the take is Commander Carson good?
Yes.
This is the hardest one you've given me. This is the hardest one you've given me. It's an overreaction. Barely an overreaction. And I want so desperately for it to be proven not an overreaction, because it'd be so funny if Commander Carson finally gets his wings back in the NFC, back in the we have massive markets, so we get all the TV, even though we're a bunch of bad teams that nobody wants to watch. NFC East with Riverboat Ron and the Commanders. Just be so good. It'd be so good and delicious, and you get their touchdowns all year long to freaking Antonio Gibson and Jahan Dotson, and apparently just ignore another prominent receiver on his roster. You
mean
Terry.
Curtis Samuel?
No, he's not ignoring Curtis Samuel. He's ignoring Terry McLaurin for some reason. I have Terry in both my fantasy teams. Beside the point. He's going to throw a lot of touchdowns, and he's going to be good. And I think it's happening. I really do. But for now, again, in the name of fairness, I have to say so far an overreaction. But we will be revisiting Commander Carson. And that's going to do it for our overreaction segment for today. That's also going to do it for our show for today. Thank you, of course, for listening. Before you go, please don't click away just yet. In case you didn't know, the Music City Audible with Justin Mello and Justin Graver coming out later this evening. If you're listening on Monday evening, they'll be reacting to the Titans game on Sunday and having all of their opinions and takes, breaking it all down for you in their first episode of the week. First of two, by the way. They're twice a week now, in case you didn't know. So check that out with Justin and Justin later tonight. Music City Audible. Going to be a great episode. Also, if you want to read any of my work at BroadwaySportsMedia.com, please do so. Had an article come out on yesterday, if you're listening to this on Monday. Again, the winners and losers from the Titans game. I think you'll find it interesting. I'm going to have another article later this week just for Broadway Insiders. Speaking of Broadway Insiders, if you're not a Broadway Insider already, please become one. Check us out at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Become an insider today for just 99 cents for your first month using the code INSIDER or using the code ANNUAL to get your annual pass for just $49.99 a year. Two fantastic deals that are not going to last forever. So go jump on those, get all of this great content that's behind the paywall. Of course, that includes the Mike Herndon Show back for episode 2 this Thursday. Don't want to miss that. Had a great first episode. I'm the executive producer on that show. If you want to check it out. I think that's everything. I think we covered it all. I think we're done here. We'll talk to you on Friday. Until then, I'm Easton for JT. Have a good week.